talking the next American sports pro. The place you want to be. The hottest new that talks about what high school athletes to watch. College players that are under the radar. Semi-pro athletes that are getting a look from the pros. International players killing it overseas. We're talking the next American sports pro. Hey, do you have what it takes? Go to www.nextamericansportspro.com and register today. Exposure is the name of the game. If you can't be found, you can't be seen. Get your profile online and get discovered today at www.nextamericansportspro.com. We're talking the next American sports pro. Hey, do you have what it takes? Go to www.nextamericansportspro.com and register today at www.nextamericansportspro.com.
All right. All right.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Yard Brawl podcast. I'm Todd Worly, and joining me is our co-host and producer, Memphis Spence. We've got a great show on deck for you today. We sat down with Steve Wiltfong. He's the VP of Recruiting and Transfer Portal for On3 Sports, and we interviewed beat writers on both sides of this week's Bowling Green against Penn State showdown. First up, though, we've got a quick whip around the rest of the conference.
Miami opened the season with a 13-6 loss at Northwestern on Saturday. The Redhawks defense picked up right where it left off last season. Coach Martin praised the defense, saying that, hey, holding the Big Ten Wildcats to just 13 points, if that was their job, then they did their job well. Miami's offense simply just didn't do enough. You have Brett Gabbert back at quarterback. Took him a little bit to kind of get going. The second half looked like Brett Gabbert despite tossing 2 interceptions. On the bright spot, he looked more comfortable as the game went on. So I think we're going to see prime Brett Gabbert back in full swing here before no time. Bright spots on offense, Cade McDonald. 8 catches, 105 yards. That was a career high for receptions for Cade. Did a wonderful job being a big target for Blaine Gabbert on Saturday against Northwestern. Defense-wise, Matt Salopek. The MAC Defensive Player of the Year last year, wrapped up 10 tackles. He's doing Matt Salopek things. Overall, I would say a C+ performance for the Miami Redhawks. It looks like they're probably going to have to take a little bit of time to use this bye week, figure some things out before they head on into their home opener against UC on September 14th.
Hello, this is Kyle Rowland from the Toledo Blade. Last week went well for Toledo. Week 1, got a win over Duquesne. I thought quarterback Tucker Gleason was solid in his first start as kind of the guy in the post-Don DeQuan Finn era. Only thing he kind of had some issues with was throwing the deep ball, easily correctable thing. Defense struggled at times in the first half, but really clamped down on the second half. Duquesne only had 5 first downs. They had less than 100 yards. Certainly some things they need to iron up. UMass this week, I think, is a huge kind of get confident, shore up some of the issues you've had, because the 2 weeks after this are not make or break for their season for Toledo, but make or break in the sense of becoming a national story and perhaps being a contender for the Group of 5 playoff spot. You got a road game at Mississippi State and a road game at Western Kentucky. 2 very difficult games, but also 2 that can kind of spotlight yourself and get you ready. So I expect Toledo to play well against UMass. I think they'll be 2-0 going into the Mississippi State game. And all in all, solid performance in week 1 against Duquesne.
NIU, obviously a big win last week, 54-15 over Western Illinois. Degree of difficulty increases a little bit this week when they head to Notre Dame. Western Illinois still searching for their first win from 2021. Notre Dame is ranked 5th in the country. So obviously a little bit of a difference. Obviously it's going to be a very, very uphill battle for the Huskies in this one. I think you look at game one standouts. You got to look at what Ethan Hampton did. They were playing the starting quarterback very close to the chest. He ends up just eating up that defense. And they weren't even playing conservative. Kind of maybe you would have expected more of a game manager mode. I certainly was. He was hurling up deep passes. They were catching them. So it was really impressive to see that. I assume they're going to get back to the basics with Ontario Brown next week. He only needed, I believe it was 8 carries to get about 72 yards. He was probably going to have about 3 times as many carries, I would assume. Maybe not any more yards. They're going to have to run the ball. They're going to have to get it to work really well. Obviously, their pass defense, or their pass rush, they were impressed with the defensive line. Talking to them today, both the coaches and the players said they played very well. Only 1 sack they came up with, though. That doesn't seem to really be worrying them a ton. They like the way the D-line played. The Notre Dame offensive line is inexperienced, so that's the one advantage the Huskies are looking at. I mean, obviously, you're just going to assume they're going to be behind the 8 ball in terms of size and speed, probably, but they do have the experience advantage there. So we'll see how it all plays out. Notre Dame is a 28-point favorite in the game. That sounds about right. If you're looking for a score prediction, 38-17, let's say Notre Dame wins out.
I'm Rachel Lenzi from the Buffalo News, here to give an update on the University of Buffalo football team for Yard Brawl. Buffalo faces number 9 Missouri on Saturday in Columbia, Missouri. Faces an SEC team for the first time since 2012 when it lost to Georgia. UB beat Lafayette 30-13 in its season opener August 29. They got a 195-yard, 2-touchdown passing performance from quarterback CJ Ogbonna. But now they pivot to play one of the SEC's top teams in the Tigers. Keys facing Missouri. Secondary needs to be prepared. Mizzou threw for 300 yards, averaged more than 10.3 yards per pass last week against Murray State. UB also has to clean up the special teams issues, and there were 2 big ones against Lafayette. A muffed kickoff and a blocked punt that set up a touchdown for Lafayette. Also, UB cannot be intimidated in a Power 4 environment. They played at Wisconsin, they've played at Penn State, they've played at Nebraska, they've played at Maryland over the last 4 to 5 years. And these places, they're loud. People are fortified. Yeah, this is going to be a bye game for them, but these are the kind of games that are going to show UB what they're made of, and this time they're going to do it against the number 9 team in the country.
Central Michigan beat Central Connecticut 66-10. The Chippewas play at FIU this week in a big Group of 5 versus Group of 5 matchup. The Akron Zips opened the season with a 52-6 loss at Ohio State, and they travel to Rutgers this weekend. Kent State lost to Pitt 55-24. The Golden Flashes head home this week to host FCS St. Francis. Eastern Michigan had a big win at UMass 28-14. They travel out to Washington this weekend. Ohio gave Syracuse everything they could handle, but ended up falling 38-22. The Bobcats host South Alabama in another key Group of 5 showdown this weekend. Ball State was the only team in the country that had a bye last week, but the Cardinals jump into the action this week with a home game against Missouri State. Western Michigan dropped a heartbreaker at Wisconsin 28-14 after hanging tough. The Broncos head to Columbus to take on Ohio State this weekend. In this week's, we are going to have, every week, we're going to have a MacYard, we're calling it the MacYard Brawler of the Week, which just goes to the player of the week from a Mac school. In the inaugural MacYard Brawler of the Week for this week is Ohio University running back Anthony Tyus III. While OU dropped the game at Syracuse, Tyus had a huge game. He rushed for 203 yards and 2 touchdowns on 16 carries for the Northwestern transfer. His highlight of the game was a 46-yard touchdown run early in the fourth quarter where he took an option pitch and just outran the entire defense. Congratulations to Anthony. Steve is the VP of recruiting in the transfer portal for On3 Sports. Steve and I worked together closely when I was with 24/7 Sports. He has as good of a pulse on college football recruiting from coast to coast as anyone that you're going to find. Talk to us. Things have changed in recruiting year by year, and especially in the last several years. In this day and age of college football, with the transfer portal and with NIL, it's a challenge for a Group of 5 and in particular MAC programs when you can develop guys, turn them into great players, and then a P4 school comes in and poaches them. How do you think MAC schools can continue to build a quality roster year after year when there's so much turnover and uncertainty from year to year.
Right, like a Carson Steele, right? He leaves Ball State, goes out to UCLA. And, had he stayed at Ball State, right, he was what, among the nation's rushers, and stayed, at UCLA under 900 yards. I don't know, man. I mean, does he get drafted if he stays at Ball State and rushes for 2,000 yards? I don't know what the answer is. He's obviously on an NFL roster and good enough to play in the league and earn that. Is it always the right move to go somewhere else? It's certainly, you want to test yourself playing against the best competition you can find. It's kind of a interesting topic. Is it always better to move up and test yourself? I don't know. But certainly, the MAC schools could poach from the 1AAs and NAIAs and evaluate talent from those college ranks and, try and push kids into the portal the same way that the highest profile schools in college football are doing. But for the mid-majors, recruiting still pretty status quo, turning over rocks, making sure you're getting into the high schools and evaluating at a high level. I mean, there's a lot of good football players out there, making sure that you're offering the right ones. And, by doing that, you got to pound the pavement and get into your schools and maintain those strong relationships with the high school coaches. So, who the guys are that are capable of playing high level football, that have a lot of upside, guys that you can pull it out of them.
Definitely. So tomorrow you get the call and you've been hired as a head coach of the MAC program.
I'm excited.
You're excited. Day one, what's your recruiting strategy?
Well, probably connecting with the high school coaches in my state right off the bat, right? And introducing myself. Well, I probably have some commits I got to maintain, right? So finding out if we like them, watching their film, reaching out to the ones we like, and then reaching out to the ones we don't and saying, hey, maybe you're better off looking for another place. But then building rapport with the high school coaches. And look, I mean, if you're a MAC program, you're still recruiting nationally, right? Looking for hidden gems and other areas. But I think foundationally, you're going to do your best with home cooking and regional-based recruiting and going from there. That doesn't mean that you still don't go down into Florida and Georgia, where there's so many good high school football players, using your assistant coaches' connections and resources, because they've worked at various places too, and finding guys that are capable of helping you win games.
Of course. How would you mitigate the potential losses from the portal? How do you retain guys? How do you navigate that?
There's nothing you can do about schools with a higher profile trying to poach good players from you. I mean, all you can do is create a good culture and a good environment and atmosphere that guys want to play in. And they have a sense of pride playing for you, and they're excited about helping you do historic things, competing for conference titles. And, now there's 16 teams in the college football playoff. Can we 12 teams. Can we snag one of those spots? Can we do something legendary? You're playing with your best friends within a culture that you enjoy. And then we're going to, you already know that you're going to be maximized here. You move up a level. Are you going to touch the ball as much? Are you going to play as many downs? Are you going to be the focal point? Or are you just another guy to help that? I mean, you're obviously they want you to come play there. They see you helping them, but you're one of our very key players here. And there's people in the NFL from all over, from FCS, lower FBSs. And, again, you go there, you rush for 900 yards, you stay here, you rush for 2,000. So those are some of the things that I'd be pointing out. But at the end of the day, these families are going to do what they can. They're going to get paid, probably have more NIL opportunity, probably getting paid to go to those schools and make a little more money in the short term. What can I do to rally my base. Western Michigan's got Stryker up there. How invested does Stryker want to be in Western Michigan football? Like what can we do to retain these rosters to make your Saturday experiences for your alma mater happier? It's tough, right? I mean, those schools have more resources. They'll pay a guy more money than you can pay him to come be a role player for them.
That was a good interview.
Steve is on it. He knows the recruiting game. He up and down from coast to coast. He's really keyed in, has a lot of great sources, works his tail off. Really pleased to have him on the show. Now, this week's Backyard Brawl of the week, and that's another thing we're going to be doing for the game of the week. So this week's Backyard Brawl of the week is the Bowling Green heading out to Penn State. In 2022, Bowling Green won on the road at Minnesota. In 2023, BG went down to Atlanta and won by 2 scores against Georgia Tech. Also in 2023, Bowling Green played Minnesota in their bowl game and gave the Gophers everything they could handle. Can Bowling Green pull off the shocking upset in State College this week? We sat down with beat writers on both sides of that game to find out more about both squads. Joining us first is Sean Fitz. Sean has been the publisher of Blue and White Illustrated on the On3 Sports Network since 2022 and previously spent 12 years running the Penn State site at 24/7 Sports. Sean and I worked closely together when I worked for 24/7 Sports. He's a dominant force in the Penn State market and very glued into the Penn State program. Spinning ahead, Penn State has a home opener now this week against hosting Bowling Green. That you've heard of, have there been any key injuries to some guys that may be Penn State players that may miss this week's game?
They seem okay. The guy they missed this last week was Khalil Dankins. He was backup tight end, and Penn State runs a lot of 12 personnel, so the tight ends are pretty prevalent. If you're 1, 2, or 3, you're gonna play a decent amount. So he's the guy to look at this week. Penn State also has a bye next week, and you hate to play this game because it is a Division I team coming in. But if you can sit him this week and then get him an extra week off before they play Kent State in a couple of weeks, maybe we'll talk about that in a few weeks. But that's the one to look at. And then at receiver, Liam Clifford's probably their number 2. He played 21 snaps on Saturday, which was a lot lower than we expected. He had missed some time late in camp, and then Caden Saunders, who was expected to be in that wide receiver rotation as well, missed a bunch of August training camp. He only returned punts for Penn State last weekend, and he just fair caught them. We saw him in warmups. He's clearly not back to 100%, so that's one to look at. And that's pretty much it. They had a backup linebacker that was injured on a kickoff coverage. We saw him after the game. He seemed okay, but got out of week 1 fairly unscathed. And that's what this team needs, because it's not as deep as it was last year. They've already had some injuries, missing a defensive end in Zariah Fisher, a backup quarterback Jackson Smolik. There's been guys that have been, sidelined for a significant amount of time. Keon Wiley's a linebacker that they missed probably more than the stat sheet would show. So that's where they're at. They're pretty well set, and I think they're going to work in some younger players this week as well.
Awesome. You've rattled off some names on both sides of the ball, but for Bowling Green fans who haven't seen Penn State play yet this year, who are some key guys on both sides of the ball to look for that really, really are glue players for Penn State?
Yeah, I think you look at you got to start at quarterback. That guy's touching the ball on every play for the most part, because they will work in a backup, Bo Perbula, who will run the ball quite a bit. But Drew Aller is the guy. I mean, he came out and was, I think, surpassed expectations against West Virginia, threw 3 touchdown passes. 2 of them were to Trey Wallace on the outside. Trey is a guy that we've heard great things about for a long time, but he hasn't been able to stay on the field for injury purposes. So he came out, he had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. So that connection started off really, really well. The big thing with Penn State this year is how far can Drew Aller take them? And there were questions about his mobility, questions about how he would handle things on the fly, and he did both excellent. He was excellent at that on Saturday. Got out of the pocket and ran. He dropped about 10 pounds this offseason, so a little bit more agile than he was last year. So, I mean, it was I don't want to say a complete surprise, because he did carve up West Virginia pretty good last year, but at the same time, he did it in a different way. He extended drives with his feet. He got out, he had this pocket presence. He did a lot of really cool things if you're looking at that progress. So Drew's the guy there. I mean, defensively, the safeties are the heartbeat here. Tom Allen has come in. He's moved from a 4-3 to a 4-2-5. They did play a little bit of 4-3 last week. But you look at Jalen Reed and KJ Winston. Those two are all Big Ten level safeties that they just fly. And it's really cool to watch. The defense is aggressive, not as aggressive as Manny Diaz was last year, but aggressive in the sense that those guys are all over the place and they have a lot of team speed on defense. So West Virginia, tried to widen things, throw some shorter stuff, get the running game outside. And Penn State, I think, just was a little too fast for that on defense.
Awesome. Okay. Good info. So at halftime, you make it through the first half. Penn State's got the lead. Then you've got the long delay. And I think you've got college kids on both sides of in both locker rooms. You have no idea how they're going to come out after that delay. I thought that spoke really highly of Penn State's leadership, both on the coaching staff and the veteran players on the team, to come out ready to roll right as soon as the second half began after the delay and drive the ball down and score a touchdown, and never let West Virginia back in the game at that point. What has that been? Has leadership been a common buzzword in fall camp, and how would you assess that right now?
Well, first with that situation, so back in 2017, they lost to Ohio State in a heartbreaker. And then the next week they went to, or it was a week or two later, they went to Michigan State and they had a lightning delay there. And they were on track to win that game. They came out of lightning delay and Michigan State beat them. And that might have been James Franklin's best chance to make the playoff in 2017. So that was, I don't want to say fresh in the mind because it's 7 years ago, but the first thing that comes to your mind as a Penn State fan, a coach or whatever, when a lightning delay happens, when a weather delay happens, is Michigan State 2017. So I think there were some lessons learned from that. It's one of those things you write down. You never know if you're going to use it, but there are lessons learned from that. And they kept them loose. They weren't in the locker room. You saw them in the tunnel just kind of hanging out, and they've got the bikes going. They've got the stretching going and everything like that. And you could see, you kind of watch them to get a feel of how close this thing was actually to restarting. And, Penn State had a plan for it, as crazy as that sounds. So they've done that. So that I think that starts with James Franklin. He remembers all these kinds of things, and he's got guys that have been working under him for the longest time. And they sort of, they don't want to feel that feeling again, because that is one that every time that you talk about James Franklin's record or getting over the hump at Penn State, Michigan State 2017 is a big thing that's waved around. So they did a nice job with that. As far as team leadership, it is, I think, a work in progress. That was one question that we had through off season, and actually last year as well. It's college football, so you got to cultivate those new leaders, and have they been able to do that? You look around and you think it's heading in the right direction. I think some of the stuff you saw from Drew Aller last week, scrambling, getting a first down, popping up, and throwing his arm up in a first down signal. That's not his natural personality. That's something that they've worked on to maybe get a little bit more out of that. So I think that was good to see. So I think it's heading in the right direction. But yeah, you've got to have a strong core if you're going to come out. They came out and scored a touchdown right after it, right after that delay, and looked pretty strong and really, from what was a great atmosphere in the first half. And I tell you what, it was 85 and sunny at kickoff. It was hot, humid. Penn State did a good job of rotating guys in, keep them fresh. I think that whole game or that whole day, it was a grind. It was like going to your bullpen and using some guys that you typically wouldn't for a little bit longer. And then, at the end of the game, you still got your closer fresh. So I think that's what we saw on Saturday from Penn State is just an overall administrative win. I think they did a really good job with that.
And now from the Bowling Green side of things, we've got Patrick Eaken, who joins us again this week. We're thrilled to have him back. Patrick is the sports editor of the Bowling Green Sentinel Tribune. Yeah, big one. It's obviously going to be a great atmosphere there in State College. Talked about, last year BG went on the road, and not only did they beat Georgia Tech, they beat Georgia Tech convincingly. And then then the year before they won at Minnesota. Then the 2023 bowl game in Detroit played Minnesota, gave Minnesota everything they could handle too.
Yes, they did.
So you've got a BG team here that has MAC championship aspirations. You've got 32 seniors that have been there and done that. How do you expect them to approach this game in State College on Saturday afternoon?
Well, I think if you talk to Coach Leffler and the captains and the leadership of the team, it's like any other game. And that's what they tell you. It's very cliche, but I think it's the way to approach it. And that's what they're going to do. And, I think, I don't know about game strategy or what they don't really reveal a lot of that to us. Coach Leffler telling me they're very talented. Obviously, Penn State is. They started out with a big win easily. And it's a rough place to play. I think for college football players, they like that environment. These guys like that. They like being the underdogs. And, it's a matter of fact, Penn State, it's not just it's a crazy environment. You've got tens of thousands of students, chanting in unison. It's almost a cult, I think, sometimes. You and I were texting back and forth. We both, I know some Penn State people, and how they're just the fans are. They're crazy. They're just into it. It means everything to them, absolutely everything. And so they got to play in that environment there. But I don't think that's going to bother them. I think that the challenge is Penn State is probably as good a football team Penn State has had in a while. As a matter of fact, Coach Leffler even said in the press conference on Monday that he saw Penn State as similar to what Michigan was last year. And they had to play Michigan last year, and they had a good first half against Michigan. And Coach Leffler has always said when the MAC schools play the Big Ten schools, sometimes the issue is not the talent, and especially at the first level, the starting level, the talent is the depth. And, the MAC schools don't always have the depth that the Big Ten schools have. And that's where sometimes you see Big Ten schools wearing down MAC schools. And you get in a game like this, teams aren't going to show a lot because they want to save a lot of that for their league play. But which is, in both leagues, they've gone to 8 games this year, so it's less non-league action. And we'll see. I think BGSU feels like they can win. I know these are athletes that don't want to back down. They a lot of them have played in Power 5 conferences. There's quite a few transfers from Power 5 conferences, and not just transfers, guys who played big time. Starting with Connor Bazelak, who started at Indiana, played there, and then he played at Missouri 2 years. And started. I mean, he's close to 10,000 yards passing. It's the 3 schools he's been at. This is his final year. He's going to want to prove something. And you have R.J. Garcia, who's hurt right now, so I don't think he's going to be playing. But you got some receivers that came from Auburn and some major Power 5 programs who were actually getting a lot of playing time. I don't know how Leffler was able to find these guys and get them to transfer in and for what reasons they transferred. But it's just amazing how many Bowling Green picked up. So they do have a lot of people, and all these players, even the ones who have returned, have played in those environments. So I think that's not going to be an issue for them. I think they're going to relish it. So we did, we had a good crowd here for the Fordham game. A lot of students. It was nice. Of course, school had already started. It was hot. It was sweltering hot. It was one of those days. I'm surprised there weren't many more cramps, but it will be better weather too. So, we'll see. I think they're ready. I think they're going to be as ready mentally as they can be.
Great interviews from both guys. Lots of information there, Todd.
There was. They're both glued in, and this is an interesting matchup. Penn State's super talented, no doubt about it, but Bowling Green's going to come into this game with a mindset that they're going to shock the world. They've done it before. Can they do it again against a super talented team? We'll see.
It's going to be rough. But we'll see what happens. Tell everybody what game you're previewing, and if they want more information, how they can get it.
Exactly. Yes. So for our exclusive club members, we are going in depth on the Ohio State Western Michigan matchup. We're going to break down the matchup, both sides of the ball, talk about different key players on the game on both sides of the ball, what the game's going to come down to, and we're going to. And if you're someone who's interested in point spreads and over unders and things like that, this is the place to be. We're going to talk about those things as well.
All right, guys, we love you. Thank you for watching this. Make sure that you like the show. If you like it, follow us on Instagram. We're also on Threads and X. at Yard Brawl. And we're going to see you all next week. You've been listening to the Yard Brawl here on the SRA TV network.